Abydos is also where you have those petroglyphs of what look like flying craft. I've got a picture of that in Modern Esoteric too, that they might have had submarines or helicopters or jet airplanes back in ancient Kemet. And as you know, Abydos is one of the oldest temples in Egypt and is also one of the largest scales as far as megalithic blocks go. So it's interesting that the farther you go back in time in Egypt, the larger the megalithic buildings and also the more sophisticated the pyramid designs are. And that should be the opposite. Usually you start with proto buildings that are old and crumbling, like some of the newer pyramids that you could see between Saqqara and Giza, some are just a pile of rubble now. But the Great Pyramids, boy, they still stand, and they're quite impressive.
Welcome to a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Welcome to Broaderlands podcast. What an honor, and I really mean that because you're one of the few that I feel I can talk about anything with, and you'll elaborate on it. Really, you help me expand my mind because you have so much depth and knowledge. So I really appreciate it.
Well, hey, Boo Boo Garcia, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure and honor to speak with you. I like those books you have over your shoulder there. Those are my 3 books in the Esoteric Series. And, I talk about a lot of different things that come out of those books. So we're going to have a great conversation today. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe we can get started with how this trilogy came about. First of all, what's the word esoteric mean?
Yeah, that means information that is known by only a select few, hoarded information in many cases, but is very tightly guarded. That's where the mystery schools of old got their information, and the secret societies of today usually draw from esoteric information. You hear it also a lot in Freemasonry, the mysteries, and a lot of the other groups that keep their information pretty tight to the chest, as a card player would say. So it's all the interesting stuff that I find that is worth writing about and discussing. And how I got involved with this, well, I started as a travel writer. 7 of my 10 published books were travel books. So I've had the great honor and privilege of traveling to all 7 continents of the world in my lifetime. Wow. I just came back from Antarctica about 5 years ago. And while I was traveling and while I was doing my travel books, they opened my mind up to all these esoteric subjects that are usually incorporated into these incredible locations around the world. So an example would be the Great Pyramid. There's just so many more questions than there are answers as to how this was built that it just keeps boggling the mind how much there is to know out there on this subject. So when the internet came out around the year 2000, when it started getting really popular, a lot of people started posting their travel itinerary information, travel information. So when you could get information online, it really made travel publishing more difficult. And so I was kind of going through this existential crisis about staying in publishing and what my next book would be. In fact, I was already starting Sacred Places Southeast Asia to be the 5th book in that series, Sacred Places 108 Destinations. Never did finish that book because while I was in the shower one day, it came to me that Esoteric would be a great name for a book series. And this is where my passion lies, is really understanding all these great mysteries that have been out in the world and that I could put together. At first, it was just one book. Then it became two books right away. And then Beyond Esoteric, the third in the series, took me 6 more years to complete. And I'm just about to come out with a second edition of Beyond Esoteric with a new chapter called Plandemic.
I love it. Yeah, I just got back from Egypt myself, or ancient Kemet, and I walked out of there with more questions than answers, and I need to go back. Like, it was just a teaser. I was there for, I don't know, 16, 17 days, but that wasn't a long enough. One of the things I seen there in the Osiris Temple in Abydos was that Flower of Life. I couldn't go down there. They charge a lot just to go down there.
Did they really? Wow, that
Yeah,
sucks.
and they charge an arm and a leg, I guess. But was that lasered on? I know you mentioned that in your books.
Yeah, from all I can tell, it's not chiseled or carved into that very hard stone of granite. But yeah, I have a picture of it in Modern Esoteric, that it had to have been laser etched into the rock, which is quite remarkable. And there's 2 of them, actually. One of them's easier to photograph because you can catch a shadow in the grooves. But Abydos is also where you have those petroglyphs of what look like flying craft. I've got a picture of that in Modern Esoteric too, that they might have had submarines or helicopters or jet airplanes back in ancient Kemet. And as you know, Abydos is one of the oldest temples in Egypt and is also one of the largest scales as far as megalithic blocks go. So it's interesting that the farther you go back in time in Egypt, the larger the megalithic buildings and also the more sophisticated the pyramid designs are. And that should be the opposite. Usually you start with proto buildings that are old and crumbling, like some of the newer pyramids that you could see between Saqqara and Giza, some are just a pile of rubble now. But the Great Pyramids, boy, they still stand, and they're quite impressive.
Yeah, thank you. I heard a story of yours where you climbed up the Great Pyramid.
Yep.
How'd that happen?
Well, 1 block at a time, and not getting shouted down by the guards is how it happened. And I did get shouted down the first attempt, and they kind of followed me out and said, yeah, yelling at me and this and that. So I was just kind of walking fast, like, all right, I'm out of here. And they stopped following me. And then I turned the corner and I noticed they weren't behind me anymore. And right at that moment, it was during the sound and light show, the lights went down. It was all lit up during the show, and the lights went down. And I remember that the human eye takes several seconds to adjust from very bright to very dark. And since they weren't following me, I just took that opportunity and just started scrambling up. Yeah, each block is about the size of a appliance, so the size of a washing machine or a kitchen sink. And I'm a real tall guy, so I didn't have a problem scrambling up. And then when the sound and light show came on again, then I had to kind of hide in the shadow and didn't hear anybody shouting me down, and did it one more time about 2/3 of the way up. Then finally I made it to the top. It was just an incredible experience.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah,
But let me just say, that was a youthful indiscretion. I'm not trying to encourage anybody to do that. You can get a big fine and possibly even imprisoned. So, but if you have a lot of money, I understand. I know some people who have still been able to pay a little backsheesh and have their way and get up there.
Right there by the Sphinx, there's those big blocks, and they were like 60-ton, 30-ton, 60-ton blocks,
Yep.
and they're perfectly bent.
Yep.
To a perfect 90. And, I've done masonry work for a long time. I'm a finished carpenter, and there's no way we can do that to this day. I even seen somewhere it's like 2 inches on one side, and it bends perfectly to the side of the wall. Like, how do they do that?
Yep.
Still mystery.
Still a big mystery. Absolutely. And so herein lies the whole problem with historically dating a lot of these sites, because the temple you mentioned is called the Valley Temple, right next to the Sphinx, and it was connected to the middle pyramid, the Chephren pyramid. But again, how would they be able to move and fit and so precisely design those blocks? As you said, some of them have a curve built right into it, which is very difficult. And I've talked to stonemasons, including Christopher Dunn, who goes to Egypt all the time and does quite a bit of measurements, and has detected drill holes that you can still see the drill marks in them. These incredible bowls that are shaped with etching tools. And he's a professional stone machinist. And he says they had to have had some tools or machining instruments to do such precise cuts as these. So it really only, and this is why I call it esoteric information, because it only deepens the mystery and begs more questions than there are answers.
Yeah, thank you. Going back to the Temple of Osiris really quick, I've watched, I think it's Deep Space or Ancient Civilizations, where they kind of try to connect Inky with Osiris. Is there a connection there? Do you know of?
I'm not an Enki expert, and I know that it's quite a heated debate
Yeah,
with some of
yeah,
my colleagues about whether Enki's a good guy or bad guy, and I can't even verify if he even existed and what his
yeah.
role was as a genetic scientist. So I prefer to stay out of that battle.
No, I appreciate it. Being there, you see these big characters, and I wanted to walk into the giants because I know you're very familiar with the giants, and you find that all over the world. Where even in Egypt, where these big beings, where these other giants, and then you see the smaller people, and then these big pharaohs, were they giants?
Well, they're sure depicted that way in the hieroglyphs and the petroglyphs around the world. But in the case of Egypt, yeah, the paintings on tombs and in other temples around Egypt quite clearly depicted as very big, human looking figures and very small, human like servants. So, in fact, I'm going to be presenting my giants and megaliths from prehistory presentation at Contact in the Desert in 10 days. And it's my free talk. So I have dozens of hieroglyphs showing quite clearly that there were giants in Egypt. And then I go around the world and show all the evidence, including many of the bones of the elongated skulls, of the moonchild skull, of all these human like, but not quite human giants that have been found, and all the evidence linking them to a long lost race of giants. But possibly there could be some living remnants still alive on the world today. And I'll show pictures of some of them, modern pictures, as well as the story of the Kandahar giant, which was killed by our special forces about 15 years ago in Afghanistan. And that was quite a very well-renowned incident that my friend Michael Jaco, who was Navy SEAL, he was stationed in Afghanistan during that time, and he remembers hearing about it, and he
Wow.
verified that indeed it was. Big guy, 18 feet tall. I mean, way bigger than any human could ever be. Keep in mind, the largest recorded human in history is the Alton giant from Alton, Illinois, named Robert Wadlow, and he was 8 foot 11 inches, and he had a pituitary gland disorder that just kept him growing and growing and growing. Whereas these giants, including the Kandahar giant, were very well proportioned. It wasn't like they were just really super elongated, but filled out, proportional in all regard. So this was their natural height without any kind of pituitary gland disorder.
So the story of David and Goliath kind of carries a little bit of truth, huh?
Carries some weight, doesn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
because then all of a sudden you could have a giant. And I'm sure if they were recruited in history, they would be great warriors on the battlefield, just usually striking fear into the opponent and maybe never even having to be in combat at all. Just the sight of them could frighten an enemy. But not David. He broke out his slingshot and nailed that giant right between the eye and killed him. Good shot.
They're also found in Nevada area, right?
Yeah, and that's where I'm located. And filmmaker Frank Jacob and his partner Tanya are coming out in a couple days, and I'm going to take them around to some of the caves that are have been found with some mummified bodies, including Spirit Cave, where the oldest mummy, and yes, I mean mummy like Egyptian mummy that is prepared and wrapped and preserved in these caves, is the oldest known mummy in North America, 10,300 years old. And also the Lovelock Caves, the most famous of them all, where dozens of mummified giants had been retrieved in the 1930s. Unfortunately, these bodies have gone missing, or in the case of the Spirit Cave mummy, was repatriated by the Native American Paiute Indian tribe. And they actually have a right to do that, and they rebury those bodies in unmarked tombs. So further analysis is not possible anymore. And it's really a shame that they do that, because there are other specimens, such as the Kennewick man from Washington State, which was, from all looks, intents, and purposes, a Caucasian who is thousands of years old, that just came out of a bog in Kennewick in Washington State about 30 years ago. And this totally rewrote history, and the Native Americans were not pleased with that, putting a Caucasian on the North American continent well long before Columbus or any of the explorers got here. And they repatriated the body and reburied it, and Kennewick man cannot be studied for further analysis.
Doesn't Native Americans say that the Serpent Mount, for an example, in Ohio, were built by giants, not by them?
As well as giant bones being found on that site too.
Wow.
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Illinois, and I used to go on vacations all the time with my family to southern Wisconsin, and that's right in the heart of giant country in the Midwest too, as well as Ohio and the Mississippi Valley. Oftentimes you'll have these giants buried within the earthen mounds, within the effigy mounds, or right next to them. Unfortunately, they too, when uncovered, they do present a real history or riddle to the archaeologists, and in many cases they would just rather see them disappear, gone. And so that's what Smithsonian Gate is all about, is a concerted effort to cover up the evidence of giants in ancient North America.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering if it's worth going to Catalina now, since everything's pretty much gone. I mean, what can I see there nowadays in the museum?
Yeah. You know, and the guy out there, the amateur archaeologist Glidden, he devoted his whole life to it, and even had a whole museum of all the bones and artifacts that he found. And nobody wanted to hear about it. Nobody cared. And then when he was getting old, he sold it, and then the collection went missing, and it can't be corroborated now either. So unfortunately, all that work he did, and he was pretty good at finding these bodies, that there may or may not be any giant bones left. I suspect there probably still are, as well as out here in Nevada. And we have some archaeologists who would be willing to do a dig. And of course, we would do everything by the book and get those DNA tests done before we really announced it. So don't trust the establishment to come out and do it, because time and time again, these bones just go missing. And there was a very famous account that I write about in Beyond Esoteric at Lake Delavan in Wisconsin, not too far away from where I grew up, where they found these giant bones in the 19th century. And it was quite a sensation. First, it made the local newspaper, then the greater Wisconsin newspapers, then it got picked up by the New York Times as a syndicated piece, that these professional archaeologists from Beloit College were doing a dig and they're finding these massive giant bones. And then when it went international in its coverage, out comes the Smithsonian, and then like the FBI, they flip their badge and, hey, we're the authority here. We're going to take over this dig. Hey, whoa, slow down, man. We put a lot of work into this. We want to follow this through till the end. Oh, it's not necessary. We'll take it over and we'll tell you everything that we find. So they turned the dig over to Smithsonian, and then got in touch with them a couple months later. And I said, oh, we're sorry. We don't know what you're talking about. There were no giant bones taken out of Lake Delavan. So you hear this story over and over and over again. And when it happens to professional archaeologists, then you realize, okay, we got a cover up on our hands. And that's what Smithsonian Gate's all about.
In one of your books, you write about the draconian Anunnaki. And who were the Anunnaki in your opinion?
Well, you can look at the Old Testament for that answer, and it starts out about the Anunnaki being these visitors from another planet with more reptilian in their DNA than humans do, but probably still more human looking than full reptile looking. But they had a little interest in our earth women, shall you say. And just like the Bible quote, these were the men of renown, and they took an interest in earth women and mated with them, and their offspring were the Nephilim. And I do believe it's the Nephilim that are found all around the world with the elongated skulls, and they are a cross between humans and this unknown father male DNA. And this is the result of testings of Brian Forrester and Klaus Dana and Loy Pai, who had the star child skull, that in all cases, earth, mother, matriarchal DNA, no questions there, but unknown father DNA that they had found were of not human origin.
So you're saying the Anunnaki were horny beings that came from the skies?
Well, you're saying that, Boo Boo Garcia, but I would agree with you on that.
Gilgamesh was part Anunnaki and part human, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting too, because there's a very famous portraiture of Gilgamesh holding under one of his arms a full-grown lion.
Yeah.
So there was a recent meme that was going around of what a full-grown lion, how tall it was, because male lions, of course, have the mane. Adolescent males do not quite have the mane as was depicted in this this carving. So they took this size of an average male lion and calculated the height of Gilgamesh, who indeed was a giant. And in fact, in many Sumerian cuneiform depictions, you see other giants, and they're twice or even 3 times the size of a normal standing human.
It's amazing. I just chatted through email with Elaine Pagels, who talks a lot about the Gnostics, and love to get your take on the Gnostics. They're fascinating to me.
So, meaning the Gnostic religion, sort of,
Yeah.
and that's the esoteric branch of Christianity. I find it really interesting that all branches of religions have their esoteric side. So in the case of Muslim, you have the whirling dervishes, and Yeah, Buddhism has their esoteric schools, as does Taoism with Lao Tzu and others. In Christianity, of course, you have the Gnostics and the Cathars, which were all but wiped out during the Inquisition in Europe, where they were just routinely slaughtered because they had some information about how Jesus was. He was an Essene, and he didn't live the life like the Catholic did. They were renouncing the church and saying you don't need that. They were mostly vegetarians, and they didn't need the church in the sense that the Catholic Church did. So they were all deemed heretics. And a lot of people aren't aware that one of the big crusades in Europe was against the Cathars. And they were brought in front of the Inquisition. And the last stronghold was a place called Monseigneur in the Pyrenees Mountains in southern France. And I write about it in my book, Sacred Places Europe. And I went to visit that site. And when the Grand Inquisitor was asked, well, how will we know who is a good person or a bad person before we assault Monseigneur? He famously said, just kill them all. God will know whose are his and whatnot. So it was basically a genocide against the Cathars. And so it was very dangerous to be in esoteric Christian back in the time of the Inquisition. And so for the Gnostics, of course, they have the Gnostic Bible, and that's where you will find the Book of Enoch, which is very revealing, as well as other versions of the Bible that were basically edited out. So the Gnostics still they keep a low profile, and they were able to survive the Inquisition. And yeah, the Gnostic texts are really fascinating. I wouldn't call myself a scholar by any means, but what I've seen is very interesting, and it kind of goes contrary in some ways to the Catholic Church and the King James Bible, for example.
Some of the Gnostic texts that I have show an Ankh. Were they still connected to ancient Kemet?
Well, isn't that interesting? Because indeed, when I was in Egypt, went down to the mountain where Moses went up, Mount Sinai, to get the tablets from God himself. And lo and behold, there was a Gnostic monastery there. So they are in Egypt. They remain there to this day. And it should be little surprise that they incorporated much of the iconography of ancient Egypt into their own knowledge of who we are and what the Egyptians had to say. So, for example, the Egyptian Book of the Dead is a great read. It's hard to read, but it's very fascinating that they had a totally different view of what happens after we die and we go into this purgatory state. The Buddhist in the Tibetan Book of the Dead call it the Bardo. And then most of us are reincarnated. Have to come back and finish what we didn't accomplish in this lifetime. And reincarnation was very much part of the Gnostic Bible as well. But of course, that had been edited out after the Council of Nicaea, in which Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. That's why you have the Holy Roman Empire with the St. Peter's Basilica and the Vatican City right in the heart of Rome, Italy. But it's its own country. It's a micronation. It does not abide by the laws of Rome or Italy. It's its own country. So they really were very clever in setting up their own designs for keeping themselves autonomous.
Yeah, three things popped up when you were mentioning what you were just saying about the, the weighing of the heart scene. I wonder, interviewing so many people that had near-death experiences and they talk about that life review. I wonder if that's representing the life review in some kind of way, a weighing of the heart.
Great question. I mean, you would think that all religions that concern themselves with the afterlife would have some kind of understanding about what happens when we pass. I mean, isn't that why most people go to church in many ways, is to understand the inexplicable, what happens after we pass? And certainly the life journey or life review, going towards the light, all these things that we hear happen when you pass um, are interpreted in different ways by different religions. Now, in Christianity, of course, you go before St. Peter and you're judged by St. Peter. Well, I don't think St. Peter can be bothered to do so many life reviews. Really, what happens is you review your own life, and then you'll see that, okay, I did harm to this person. And then you'll have to come back and you'll have to feel the same kind of pain that you inflicted on others. And that's the laws of karma too, that you will have to experience all the negative that you've done. So this is what I call the real philosopher's stone, is that once you know that all your actions, your words, even your thoughts, but certainly any deeds, for better or for worse, is what your life review is going to be. So if you have an overabundance of helping people out and being service to all, then perhaps you don't have to be reborn again. And those people, according to the Buddhists who do come back, are called bodhisattvas. Those are the ones who have great compassion for the human race, and they wish to come back to help to the best of their ability.
Yeah, I love that. I love the hearing of the stories about the life review, and how everyone that had this life review comes back with being more compassionate, more loving, more kind, more mindful. And that's what happened to me in my awakening. I just became more loving, more kind, more compassionate for humanity. And it's kind of hard to have some kind of awakening and not want to be more helpful for humankind.
Good point. Are you saying that you had a out of body experience?
I've had outer body experiences. I had a few of them, and I also had I I like to call it a glimpse of nirvana. You know, after so much
Hmm.
suffering, I woke up because I wasn't raised with religion or spirituality. I'm from San Pedro, California, and raised in the neighborhoods. And so I really didn't have any information of all this stuff. And it started to come to me after I had my awakening. You know, kind of like that St. Francis prayers at the very end. It's only by dying that one awakens to eternal life. And something happened, something shifted in me. And that old me died, that false self, or that, and that true self started to emerge more for me.
Hmm.
So
Fascinating. That's super cool.
yeah,
Hmm.
thank you. Who were the archons in your opinion that the Gnostics talked about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm still trying to figure out the big picture on that. So, but many cultures around the world talk about the archons and this archonic network, including Carlos Castaneda um, was the master, and he or Carlos Castaneda was the author, but talked about the master Don Juan, who spoke about the archons. That's my main source of information on it. In Eastern cultures in Middle East, they were called the jinn. They're usually the tricksters or the pranksters. The Buddhists had a name for them. The Hindus have names for them. Um, but our name that basically carries down are the archons, or this archonic network. And they, of course, are not in our physical reality, but they are just outside of perception. Okay, so this is what's many
Interesting.
call the unseen realms, right? That they're out there, they're behaving badly in most cases, and they feed off of uh, our anger, our fear, and that's called loosh. So the fact that Earth is predominantly a very fearful place just feeds right into this archonic network. And there are these beings, these fourth dimensional beings that can get inside your head. It's kind of like the old the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other, and both are talking into an ear and, oh, do this, no, do that. Yeah, they would be the devil side of things, trying to entice you to perhaps do things that would create more fear, create more anger, create more pain. And this is their food source. And so Carlos Castaneda, when he wrote about them in his books, would say that that most people, most humans have no idea that they even exist. But once you do, once you can identify them, and you can bring yourself up to a higher emotional state where you're not living in fear, anger, or hatred at all, that they can't feed off you at all. You're of no use to them, so they leave you alone. And so that's probably a good thing for people to understand, is that getting yourself in a better emotional state is your best protection against the Archons.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is there a connection with the elites and the Archons? Because you talk a lot about like the cabal and mainstream media, and how it's always just like putting us in fear, chaos, hatred, us against them, separation, survival mode mentality. And that only breaks down our immune system and keeps us in a lower vibration, which allows the archons to come in and have some kind of attachments on a lot of us. I also believe we live in a system that's creating addiction. And most people that have a lot of addiction or strong in addiction have a lot of trauma, have a lot of emotional attachments that have branded them from past experiences that keep them in a lower vibration, which gives a lot of entity attachments, in my opinion. It keeps people stuck. Is this all done for a reason?
Yeah, exactly. That's just it. So these elite, many of them, the bankers of the world, there's a great documentary that bankers fund both sides of every war, and they do. So if you can understand that this elite class profits and benefits from war, the most atrocious activity mankind can engage in,
Wow.
because it attracts this archonic network. And so I think that the deeper answer to your question is, yes, they harness this energy. They work with them. They're perhaps even subservient to this archonic network. So it's been explained to me by people who can remote view and astral travel that the lower fourth dimensional density, which is just outside of our purview of perception, actually, some people can get little glimpses of that and even see these archons will be kind of like a dot flying around. You kind of follow it with your eye and it moves around this way and that. But this lower fourth dimensional density has been described to me like you pull off at nighttime into, you're driving along the highway and you take the wrong turn off and you find yourself in a really bad neighborhood and you lock the doors and you're looking around and you can't believe what you're seeing, all the crime, things that are going on around you. You're fascinated by what you see, but you certainly don't want to stop and hang out very long. And so this lower fourth dimensional reality is basically where the ghosts and incarnate beings that can't resolve their past lifetimes, where they exist. But it's also where other entities, such as the reptilians, the draconis, they are also fourth dimensional entities of this realm. You could even say that they're the chiefs of this realm. And they have been given the opportunity on many occasions to ascend, to evolve, to go up to the fifth dimension and higher, which you have to be in a state of bliss or pure love and not wanting to do harm anymore. But the reptilians, they don't want to do that. They are basically a conquering species, and they kind of like their high position on the food chain when they're able to get lower entities under their wings, so to speak.
What do you think about Yahweh? Was Yahweh one of the Anunnaki in your take?
Well, Yahweh is another name for God. And, again, I'm not a biblical scholar. I can't really speak on where that name comes from, but probably, yeah. I mean, a lot of this stuff just gets handed down and repackaged or repurposed, depending on the culture or the language that's doing the borrowing.
Yeah, thank you. Um, Extraterrestrials, are they in the fourth dimension as well?
So the ones that are in service to self, you could say the Greys and the Reptilians are. Now, there have been some reports of certain reptilians that do want to ascend, that basically break off from the Chikar, is what they're also called, network, and they say, okay, we're ready to go to 5D. And then, of course, once you do that, you ascend, you evolve, and all beings are on this trajectory that we are moving in that direction, whether it's this lifetime or many, many more in the future. You will go that way because it's just the destiny of species. Just like most animals, their spirits will become human someday. And that's why you can see so much hatred and abuse of the animal kingdom sometimes. It's usually someone who has just come up from an animal spirit and they're taken out against perhaps another animal species that used to kill them. So they would go lion hunting or kill the big animals that were once their enemies as another animal species. So in the same way that these Draconis that remain in the fourth dimension, they're still picking on humans, and they got a little taste for human flesh and blood, but they prefer adolescence before we get too toxified. And therein lies much of the adrenochrome and some of the other nasty stuff they do. But to answer your question, the other ET races that are still locked in the fourth dimension are also the gray alien species, and most of them before they ascend. But almost all gray aliens, I would almost say everyone, are test tube, are created beings, are chimeric. And they don't, in many cases, do not have a soul. So they're just basically robotic, although living in an organic body. So they really wouldn't even have that opportunity to ascend, because you do need a soul to embrace the love and the light that is required to move into a fifth dimensional density. And that's why what they say, when humans are ready to make the leap, that those who do embody that love and show it in their actions and words and everything else, they will make that ascension. They'll just basically leapfrog right over the fourth dimension and can go straight into the fifth. And that could be the promise of the human race. We do have that possibility that we could see that even in our lifetimes. And it doesn't mean that, poof, we're going to disappear and gone into the fifth dimension. No, it just means that you would then start to take on more of these superhuman characteristics that we've heard about with the seers, the rishi, as they're called in India, and many of the yogis who have these abilities to use telepathy as communication, to use telekinesis to affect matter around us, who can astral travel, and all sorts of other things that I describe in my Esoteric series of books, that we have the potential to do that. And this is what would occur once you make this big leap to fifth dimensionality, is that these superhuman abilities will just start to come to you quite naturally.
That's what I love about your writings and your books, because in these 3 books that you put together, I know you have many more, but you expose a lot of stuff and it can get a little scary at first. But then you talk about ascension and cosmic evolution, and I really appreciate that about your work. Um, Maybe you can touch really quick on the pineal gland and pineal gland suppression you talk about in your book, one of your books.
Sure, yeah, I have a whole chapter on the pineal gland in modern esoteric, and that is this very small gland right between the 2 hemispheres of the brain, often described as the third eye. And it's pine cone shaped, although it's about the size of a grain of rice. And that's why you see the pine cone represented around the world, including on the staff of the Pope himself.
Yeah.
So they're aware of this. The Vatican, they hold their cards tight to their chest too. They don't want to give away too many of their secrets. But I find it interesting that they're doing a press conference this week talking about the difference between apparitions and supernatural experience, which also includes UFOs and ETs. Almost like they're getting us prepared for something like a fake alien invasion, perhaps. But the pineal gland is the way for most people to ascend. So once you can activate your third eye, it's usually associated with the Kundalini effect of activating the chakra energy bodies throughout the body, and then becoming a fifth dimensional being, really embodying love and having this way of seeing the world in a totally different way, and experiencing the unseen realms, that which most people can't see. So why do you think so much has been done to prevent us from opening our pineal gland? For example, we don't learn about it in school at all. We don't do activities or classwork to open it. Plus, they put fluoride in the water and toothpaste and some foods, and fluoride is known to calcify specifically the pineal gland, shutting it down from overabundance of fluoride in the body. And so many city municipalities still put fluoride in the water, and they have arranged it in such a way that people can't appeal to their city council to get it taken out. They just keep doing it. So I would recommend don't drink tap water. It's not even recommended to shower in it, but certainly don't get fluoride in your toothpaste or any other ingestible, because it will just calcify your pineal gland.
Do you think that's why on Ash Wednesday they cross out the pineal gland?
Yeah, well, good point. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, they do a cross right over the point of the head where the third eye is located. That's a good observation. Maybe so. Cross it out with ash.
And you broke it down in your book, just like Yogananda. When I first read Yogananda, I had a lot of guidance with Yogananda early in my awakening, Paramahansa Yogananda. But he talks about when the eye is single, the whole body is full of light, which is
Yeah.
the teachings of Jesus on the pineal gland, right?
Yep, it sure is. Yeah, that book had a huge influence on me as well. I read it while I was traveling through India, and each chapter is about a yogi with these superhuman abilities. And just, boy, you cannot read that book and walk away thinking, what if other humans were able to achieve some of the stuff that these other humans, sure, they're yogis, sure, they're learning this stuff their whole lives, sure, they have esoteric teachings in India that can help people do this. But what if people in the West were really brought into these techniques? And that's what Yogananda was doing with his self-realization fellowship, is opening up many different schools and learning facilities. As you know, in Southern California, there's quite a few. That famous surf break down near San Diego called Swami's was named after Paramahansa Yogananda. Of course, his lake temple on Sunset Boulevard, Pacific Palisades, is amazing. And he's got several other building self-realization fellowships in Southern California as well.
Yeah, I love it. My first 5 years of my awakening, he really, really was speaking to me intuitively, and I didn't even know who this character was.
Wow.
So you know what I find interesting about Yogananda was he died in like 1952 or so, but he was saying what the Gnostics were saying. In the Gnostic Gospels were found in 1945, but they weren't translated until some years later. And when he died in 1952 or so, and what he said was basically confirmed through the Gnostic texts, I thought was interesting. You know, about self-realization and the teachings of Yeshua versus needing a savior for your sins and all that stuff. Yeah, so I thought that was very interesting.
Good point. He sure is really an advanced being to know all that. And did you know when he passed away, his body did not decay? He was
Yeah.
basically, and it's been observed in other cases that some of these yogis in India in a sitting posture will not decay. They're dead, the spirit leaves, but the body remains preserved for quite a long time.
Yeah, you're right. It was in the LA Times as well. It was preserved after 27 days. It was still perfectly,
Yep.
you know, all intact. And he actually predicted his death too. He knew he was going to go. He was going to go. He told his disciples, and he collapsed after a talk.
Hmm. And many yogis know that. They'll
Yeah.
have a predetermined date when they know they're going to go, and they're in a state where they're ready to just walk out of their body. I'm sure they've prepared many, many times. As I said, the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Tibetan Book of the Dead are manuals that help people think about the passing process. And if you're well aware of what's going to happen, you're not afraid, and you can just put yourself in a seated position and just meditate your way and just walk right out painlessly and leave your body when it's time to go.
Yeah. Thank you. And before we go, how do we evolve as a human, as human beings for humanity? You talk about cosmic evolution, cosmic awareness, and I really appreciate that part in one of your books. I think it was Modern Esoteric that it or Beyond Esoteric. I forget which one it was, but what's your take on what do we need to do to evolve and stop being in this prison planet?
Well, in my email correspondence with people, I always put a positive quote. And this one is: watch your thoughts, for they become words. Watch your words, for they become actions. Watch your actions, for they become habits. Watch your habits, for they become character. Watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. It starts with our thoughts, and then our words become our actions. And the more that we're able to be mindful of that, that everything we put out there in the world, our thoughts, our actions, our habits, it's all a form of energy. And it's really the energy that you put out, for better or for worse, that will determine not only the circumstances of your passing, whether you need to come back or not. And a vast majority of humans do need to come back. They have not been studying the Egyptian Book of the Dead or the Tibetan Book of the Dead. They have no idea. Most people die quite suddenly and in a lot of pain, or quite shockingly, sudden death. But even elderly people who have not trained or been mindful of these acts will have a traumatic death, and it's the trauma at death that can also lead to one needing to be reborn. But Earth is going through major changes right now, and it's my understanding that most people will not be reborn here on Earth. There's not going to be that many bodies for them either. As we know, there's a bit of depopulation going on at the moment. You can just look at statistics that cancer rates are through the roof. I think we all have an idea of what might have caused that. And the numbers in this country, the birth rates are going way down, and they're going to continue on this trend. So my suggestion is get it right this time. Work on yourself. The two most profound words from the ancient world are on the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, and that they say, know thyself. If you really do the work and get to know yourself, that you'll be well prepared for your passing. You'll also know that everything that you do in this world is an energy exchange. And when you are in service to others, you can help build your own personal karma, that you have done more positive than negative in your lifetime, and therefore would have the choice of coming back as a bodhisattva or just moving on. Maybe it's time to go to another planet where they teach you about dimensional skills, and you're born right into a fifth dimensional density that you can move very quickly in that regard. So you work on yourself, know thyself, and do the very best you can to help humanity every single day. Help that old lady walk across the street. I always give $1 to someone if they're asking for money, and just do the best you can. That's all you can do in many cases, and just always be truthful and honest in every action you take as well. And I think things will work out if you take that perspective.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Would you like to share about any links, anything you're working on, or any last words, how to find you and your books?
Sure, yeah. I speak at about a dozen conferences a year. Just came back from the Journey to Truth in Illinois a couple days ago, and getting ready for my trip to 3 conferences in a row in the month of June, starting with Contact in the Desert, where I'll be giving my presentation on the giants, my workshop on the secret hidden anomalies of Antarctica, and my intensive on Monday, the last day, on hidden esoteric in plain sight. I'm also moderating the ancient civilization panel at Contact in the Desert. Then I got a smaller event in Las Vegas, June 8th and 9th at the Alexis. And then I'm off to Disclosure Fest in Los Angeles before I make it back up here to my ranch in Nevada. So go to bradolsen.com, just so you see it spelled there. And at the top of the page, you'll see the conference schedule. Come on out like you did. We got to meet, and you bought all 3 of my books that are sitting right behind you. And other conferences that are coming up. I got a pretty busy schedule, and even booking into next year. Also, if you want a signed personal copy, if you can't make it to one of the conferences, you can go to cccpublishing.com, and that's my company's website. And all those sales come through my office, so I'm able to sign copies of my books for people as those orders come in.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it, and thanks for coming on. It was an honor. I'm gonna end it with some of your words in Beyond Esoteric, and it says, "Each of us has Christ consciousness inherent within us, or a Buddha nature, or the highest form of goodness one can imagine. We are born with this capacity, and it comes from within. When we come to this collective realization that we are all divine beings, our reality will change dramatically." Thank you for coming on, Brad.
Hey, my pleasure, Boo Boo Garcia. It was great talking with you today. Thanks for having me on, and perhaps we can do it again sometime.
Thanks again. Namastizzle.
Namastizzle.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a play. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the